Mai Valentine was one of the strongest duelists in the original anime. It managed to reach the finals of both Duelist Kingdom and Battle City. Most other duelists struggle to keep up with the likes of Yugi Muto, Seto Kaiba, and Joey Wheeler, but Mai managed to hold her own consistently, proving her worth as a player with her Harpie Lady strategy. So today, we're going to look at Mai's 10 most iconic cards, how Mai used them to her advantage, and whether or not her strategies actually hold up in the TCG. And at number 10, we have Shadow of Eyes, one of Mai's strangest trap cards and also played an important role during the Duelist Kingdom arc. What makes this trap card so weird though is the difference between its anime and TCG version. In the TCG, Shadow of Eyes is a normal trap card that can only be activated when an opponent sets a monster to the field, and forces that monster into face-up attack position while also preventing the flip effects from being activated. But in the anime, Shadow of Eyes is actually a card that equips to a monster you control and allows that monster to use pheromones in order to force an opponent's monster into attack position while tempting them to declare an attack. This all came with one big downside though. These pheromones don't work on female monsters. Now, despite this strange effect though, Shadow of Eyes was a dominant threat in Mai and Yugi's Duelist Kingdom duel. You see, in this duel, Yugi was struggling with an internal conflict after his defeat with Kaiba, which caused him to hold back and be distracted in his duel against Mai. This disappointed the pro duelist as earlier Mai had surrendered a duel to give Yugi the star chips he needed to meet her in the finals, where she had hoped the King of Gangs would go all out against her. But because of Yugi's struggle, Mai held a huge advantage. And the icing on the cake was Shadow of Eyes, which when paired with the Mirror Wall was forcing Yugi's monsters to attack, halving their strength so they could then be destroyed by Harpie Lady, a nearly unbreakable strategy that almost won Mai the duel. And if this had been Mai Valentine at the start of the series, she would have been happy with her victory. But instead, she was dissatisfied, and so gave Yugi some more words of encouragement, reminding him to face his fears. Just like how Yugi and his friends had taught Mai to face her own fear of defeat. This encouragement resonated with Yugi, allowing for him to stage a comeback which would eventually lead him to winning the duel, putting him one step closer to facing Pegasus and saving his grandpa. But if Mai had just been even a little less caring for her new friends, Shadow of Eyes would have secured her victory against Yugi Muto. Unfortunately though, for as powerful as the anime made this card out to be, Shadow of Eyes has never really been a strong card in the TCG. Its effect isn't entirely useless. It can technically be okay against strategies focused on flip monsters as a way to prevent their effects from activating, while forcing them into attack position, which could help with the potential OTK. The issue is, there are a ton of better ways of dealing with set monsters in the field that are way less awkward to use and don't require a turn of setup, and can instead be used instantly to not only prevent that monster from activating its flip effect, but also remove it from the field entirely. So overall, it's a shame that Shadow of Eyes wasn't really able to successfully transition into TCG, as not only was it a card that pushed Yugi to his limits, it also allowed for Mai to show off the lessons she had learned from her newfound friends. And burned into the number 9 spot is Harpie Lady Phoenix Formation, a card that showed just how much the Orichalcos had influenced Mai. And that's because of Phoenix Formation's powerful removal effect, which pretty much just makes it a Raigeki for the Harpie Lady strategy. Because if you control 3 or more Harpie Ladies or Harpie Lady Sisters, you can target and destroy monsters your opponent controls up to the number of Harpie Ladies or Sisters you have on your side of the field. Then you get to inflict damage to your opponent equal to the attack of the monster with the highest original attack. In the TCG, this effect comes with a bunch of different downsides, as it prevents you from conducting your battle phase or special summoning any monsters from your main or extra deck. But the anime version of this card is actually a lot stronger, as it does damage equal to the attack of all monsters you destroy, and only has one restriction which prevents Harpie monsters you control from attacking for the turn. This made the card a strong tool in the anime, and one the Orichalcos influenced Mai would use to great effect during the Waking the Dragons arc, where she felt a desperate need to prove herself as a top duelist to step out of the shadow of Yugi, Kaiba, and Joey, which is why Mai made several choices to her deck from Battle City, making her strategy more merciless. This included incorporating the power of the Orichalcos, which not only strengthened her monsters, but enabled the power of Phoenix Formation by allowing Mai to summon out even more Harpie Ladies to the field in the back row. These new cards coincide with the now Orichalcos controlled Mai's new Ruthless strategy, with Phoenix Formation being particularly cruel as not only did it destroy your opponent's monsters, it burned your opponent's life points based on the total attack of every monster it destroyed, and was so strong it allowed for Mai to defeat Maximilian Pegasus, the creator of duel monsters. But this card isn't quite as cold-blooded in the TCG, and so even when Harpies had their chance to shine in the competitive game, no one ever played Phoenix Formation. A big part of that is because of how difficult it is to use. Phoenix Formation's effect can definitely be useful to clear an opponent's board, and because of its burn, can even be the reason you win a duel. But the downside makes it a really awkward to use card. Controlling 3 or more Harpie Lady or Harpie Lady Sisters definitely isn't impossible, as a Harpie strategy can easily swarm the field with a ton of Harpie Ladies thanks to Harpie Channeler and Elegant Egotist, both of which make Phoenix Formation a little stronger. If it also didn't have the downside that prevents you from special summoning from your main or extra deck, as this makes it a lot harder to actually swarm the field when you're locked out of using your best combo pieces. But even if this card didn't have this restriction, It's still just a lot worse to clear the field because of the setup it requires, as it's a lot easier to use a Raigeki, Dark Hole, or Lightning Storm if you want to wipe away your opponent's board of monsters and then OTK them with your other cards, rather than relying solely on the burden of Phoenix Formation, which skips your battle phase. So it's pretty unlikely that Phoenix Formation will ever see any real success. The Harpie Lady strategy has evolved to the point where using the card is more of a detriment than anything else. And even though this is somewhat unfortunate because of how powerful the card was in the anime, it's cool that the more cruel cards in my strategies aren't that amazing, showing that she was already a good duelist and didn't need to rely on the Orichalcos to compete. And roaring into number 8 spot is Harpie's Pet Dragon, a level 7 dragon monster that gave Mai's Harpie Ladies a powerful beat stick that could even take in the likes of the Summoned Skull. And that's because of Pet Dragon's effect, which lets it gain an extra 300 attack for every Harpie Lady on the field, which with enough Harpie Ladies can turn Pet Dragon from a decent beater into an absolute powerhouse. As a result, Harpie's Pet Dragon became one of Mai's strongest monsters, and one that could reach ridiculous levels of power, such as Mai's first Orichalcos duel against Joey, where Pet Dragon's attack grew to even stronger than likes of the Blue Eyes White Dragon and Blackluster Soldier at an impressive 2400 attack points thanks to its own effect, and the power of the Orichalcos. But most people likely remember Pet Dragon from Mai's duel against Yugi in the Duelist Kingdom's final, where it appeared as a terrifying force that pushed Yugi to his limits, and had an attack power so great that when Yugi mounted it onto Catapult Turtle, it was capable of breaking Mai's mirror wall. Now, in the TCG, Harpie's Pet Dragon wasn't really the strongest boss monster the anime made it out to be. It could still be decently strong with the right setup, but by the time Harpies were competitively viable, the game had long gone past the need for huge beat sticks as a win condition. That doesn't mean Pet Dragon was terrible though, but its role in Harpie Lady strategy changed quite a bit. Instead of being just a decent beat stick, Pet Dragon instead saw play because it was an amazing target to special summon with the effect of Harpie Channeler, a level 4 monster that becomes level 7 while you control a dragon monster. This meant that by summoning Pet Dragon with the effect of Channeler, you had instant access to any rank 7 in the game, which was actually really valuable in 2013 and 2014, as it gave the deck access to the likes of Dracosac, a powerful removal option, and Big Eye, which could steal your opponent's best monsters. And in the modern era, while Harpie strategies usually don't see much success, an evolution of Harpie's Pet Dragon, known as Fearsome Fire Blast, actually features in a few different win-focused strategies as a free extender. As a whole though, it's really cool to see how Harpie's Pet Dragon has evolved. While Mai used it more as a boss monster, the more modern Harpie support cards have given greater utility beyond just being a beatstick, and allowed for Harpie's Pet Dragon to remain by her side even in the modern day. And at number 7, we have Mirror Wall, a staple part of my strategy that made her monsters almost invincible. Because with Mirror Wall, the attack of any monster your opponent controls that declares an attack is cut in half. This also comes with a maintenance cost though, as during each of your standby phases you must pay 2000 life points or destroy the card. But the anime version had no such cost, and even negated the attack of your opponent's monsters as they would instead attack their mirror image. This made Mirror Wall a really effective part of Mai's arsenal, and a card that protected her Harpie Ladies from battle against comparatively stronger monsters, effectively creating an almost impenetrable wall since it's a continuous trap, which meant that it always stayed on the field. So if her opponent didn't have any way of dealing with Mirror Wall, Mai's monsters were always safe from battle, since if a monster did declare an attack, their strength was halved permanently, which allowed for Harpie Lady to stage an effective counterattack on the next turn. And it made sense for Mai to run such a defensive card, because before she had met Yugi, Joey, and the rest of the gang, she saw her Harpie Lady monsters as her only friends, and couldn't bear the thought of watching them being destroyed. In the modern TCG though, Mirror Wall is rarely going to have the chance to protect any monster. You see, like other battle tricks, Mirror Wall can technically catch an opponent off guard by forcing their boss monster to crash into a much weaker card, giving you a major advantage. But because of the abundance of removal options most decks have, as well as how easy it is to set up an early negate, battle phase focused traps don't really see too much success in the modern era. But in the early days of the game and even in Duel Links, Mirror Wall did actually see some minor success, and was used just like how it was in the anime, to create a wall that can weaken your opponent's monsters, leaving them as easy targets for your own, which made it an effective battle trick for as long as it stayed in the field, but not one that was guaranteed to be impenetrable, as it eventually be forced to leave the field when you can no longer pay its hefty cost. So it's nice to see that a card that was used to protect Mai's most sentimental monsters in the anime once had its place in the actual game to protect monsters other duelists cared about, even though it no longer has its place in the actual meta. And capturing the number 6 spot is Amazoness Chainmaster, one of the Amazon monsters that Mai included in her Battle City deck that allowed her to reach the finals. And each Amazon has her own role to play in Mai's strategy. Amazon Fighter and Swordsman were great beatsticks. Amazon Archers were a great battle trick, and Amazon Chainmaster could be used to turn your opponent's cards against them. You could do that in the TCG whenever it was destroyed by battle if you pay the cost of 1500 life points. Letting look at your opponent's hand is still one of their monsters. Although the anime version of this card works a little differently, it only requires 1000 life points and triggers whenever an attack position Chainmaster is sent to the graveyard, rather than just when it's destroyed by battle. And instead of letting you add a monster from your opponent's hand, It lets you add any monster from their deck. This effect led to one of Mai's most important moments in the series during her shadow game against Merrick, where for every monster that was destroyed by Merrick, Mai would lose a memory of one of her friends. Of course, she wasn't going to let this happen, and with a genius play, she sent her own Chainmaster to the graveyard, which prevented one of her memories from being lost, and allowed for Mai to trigger her effect to steal the Winged Dragon of Ra. If all had gone to plan, this would have actually been a game-winning move, as not only would it prevent Merrick from using Ra against her, it would have allowed for Mai to wield the power of the Egyptian god. But because she didn't know the ancient chant to transform Ra from its spear mode, Mai was left helpless as Merrick performed the chant to take control of the god card, leading to his victory, leaving Mai helpless and trapped within the Shadow Realm after Yugi and Joey had saved her from taking the full force of an Egyptian god. Thankfully, shadow games don't come up that often in real life, so if you want to use Chainmaster to steal your opponent's Egyptian god card, you're not going to lose your soul. But because of the way Chainmaster works in the actual game, she hasn't seen any real competitive play. And that's because in order to activate her effect, she needs to be destroyed by battle. In the modern day, effects that float when destroyed by battle usually aren't that viable because there's a ton of different ways to remove a monster from the field without using the battle phase. But even back in the earliest days of the game, Chainmaster wasn't really that good, as other floaters like Mystic Tomato and Sangan were guaranteed to always net you advantage and work with your deck. And while Chainmaster could be used as a decent hand control card, there was no guarantee that your opponent had a monster in their hand, or that the monster you steal from them would be useful in your deck. But even though Chainmaster never really saw too much use, the Amazon as archetype actually had a big impact on the metagame of Duel Links, where thanks to its modern support, there was a time where it was one of the best decks you could play thanks to Onslaught's amazing removal. So even though Chainmaster has never really been too important in the TCG, the legacy of the Amazoness cards can still be felt in Duel Links, where their powerful playstyle even put some of their cards in the Forbidden and Limited list. And while it's not likely that you're going to be able to use Chainmaster to steal your opponent's Egyptian god card, it's cool to see that one of my stable archetypes actually had its time of day in a different format. And circling to number 5 is the Seal of Orichalcos, a card that promised anyone that used it greater power, with Mai being no exception. And part of that power is instilled in your monsters, because while the power of the Orichalcos is on the field, all your monsters you control gain 500 attack. But that's not all, because it also protects itself one time each turn from being destroyed by card effects. And it even protects weaker monsters in the field as well, because while you control 2 or more face-up attack position monsters, your opponent can't target any monsters you control for an attack except the monster with the highest attack. But for this power you must pay a price, because not only must you destroy all special summon monsters you control after activating it, you're also locked out of the extra deck entirely while you control it. And you can only activate the Seal of Orichalcos once per duel. And this is the TCG version of the card, because the anime version had some big differences. Because this version of the card allowed you to put monsters into your spell and trap card zone, allowed you to swarm the field with up to 10 monsters at once, and your opponent couldn't attack your monsters in their back row unless the front row was clear first. The anime version also gave them the same 500 attack boost, but without the downside of the TCG. Although you might instead have to pay an even greater price, because if you happen to lose a duel while the Seal of Orichalcos was in either player's field, you will lose your soul. This made the Orichalcos an evil card, and one that was used by Dards at the Dome organization in the Awaken the Dragons arc in order to capture souls to awaken the Great Leviathan. So why did Mai use the card? Well, you see, after the events of Battle City, Mai was left heartbroken and traumatized. She was still a successful duelist even after her loss to Merrick and managed to do well in a ton of different tournaments. But despite her skills and achievements, Mai was led to believe that she was still far weaker than the likes of Yugi, Kaiba, and Joey, and constantly lived in their shadow. What's worse was that Mai was having near constant nightmares of her time in the Shadow Realm, which caused her fear of loss and defeat to steadily increase its grip over her. And without Joey or her other friends to help her, Mai was left lost, scared, and alone, until Valen and the Orichalcos reached out to her and promised the victories that she was so desperate for. From there on in, Mai allowed the Orichalcos to have influence over her and her monsters, and would use the card consistently even against her former friends, such as Joey Wheeler, just so she could prove her strength as a duelist, uncaring for the fact that her victory would result in him losing his soul. This made Mai absolutely ruthless with this card, because not only did it boost all of her monsters' attack, it allowed her to swarm the field with lots more Harpie Ladies, giving her access to new cards like Harpie Lady Phoenix and Sparrow Formation. But the sad thing about the Orichalcos was that even though Mai gave into her fear of defeat for its strength, the power that it promised her was hollow. Because in every duel where she faced Joey, he could have beaten her, but he held back in order to find a way to prevent Mai from losing her soul. This turned out to be a costly mistake in the last duel together, where Joey was so exhausted from the prior duel against Valen, he ended up fainting before the duel was over, which caused the Orichalcos to take his soul, and for Mai to realize how foolish she had been to give up on her friends out of fear. However, as touching as this moment was, a situation like this isn't likely to happen in the TCG, because of the way the Orichalcos has been nerfed. The biggest difference between the two versions of the card is, of course, that if your opponent loses while it's on the field, they no longer actually lose their soul. But it's the card's other nerfs that make it so hard to use. Destroying all special summon monsters you control on activation technically isn't the worst thing, as you can just activate the Orichalcos before you combo off to give your monsters a free 500 attack boost. But because the card also locks you out of special summoning from the extra deck entirely, it means that if you activate the Orichalcos before you perform your plays, you can't use one of the most important tools in the game, and if you activate it after you summon out from the extra deck, those monsters will end up being destroyed. This makes it really awkward to use for most strategies, as most decks in the game would much prefer access to their extra deck options rather than gaining an attack boost. Which in a way actually makes a lot of sense, because just like in the anime, the power the Orichalcos gave Mai ultimately wasn't worth it. It required her to give up far more than she would gain, and while the Orichalcos can give you some power, you have to give up a lot more in order to use it. A 500 attack boost is rarely ever worth it, just like how for Mai, it really wasn't worth it to give up her friends just so she could ensure victory, a fact that she realized a little too late. And slashing into number 4 is Cyber Harpie Lady, a version of Harpie Lady that comes pre-equipped with Cyber Shield. This gives the new version of Harpie Lady 500 more attack than its original counterpart, with the only other real difference between this card and the original being that this card is an effect monster. And funnily enough, it's actually one of the only effect monsters in the game that actually doesn't have an effect, and instead has a condition which makes it so that it's always treated as Harpie Lady, even in the deck building process, which makes it so if you run 3 Harpie Ladies of this card, you actually can't run the original Harpie Lady. Regardless of this downside though, Cyber Harpie Lady was a great upgrade from the original counterpart that Mai used for the Battle City onwards, and was a great way for my strategy to keep up with the even stronger monsters. But arguably, the most iconic use of this card wasn't even by Mai herself, because after Mai had fallen into the Shadow Realm, the rest of the group were suddenly distracted by the interference of Noah Kaiba, who forced everyone's minds into the virtual world. While most of the people trapped there wanted to escape for their own sake, a big reason why Joey was desperate to leave the simulation was that so he could defeat Merrick and rescue Mai from the Shadow Realm. This caused Joey to actually incorporate a small Harpie package as part of his deck in his and Yugi's tag duel against the Big Five, where he selected this card alongside Harpie's Feather Duster as a way to pay homage to Mai, as well as vow that he would save her. And this combo of cards ended up being really useful, as not only was Feather Duster vital for clearing away the Big Five's legendary ocean, Cyber Harpie had enough attack to take down the legendary fisherman. And it just so happens this attack strength actually led to Cyber Harpie Lady's success in the TCG as well, because during the time where Harpie Lady was a viable strategy, you didn't actually need to run the original Harpie Lady at all, because there were a few different cards that always treated themselves as Harpie Lady no matter where they were, allowing them to be summoned off of Elegant Egotist. This opened up some options for your choice of Harpie Lady. One of the better cards you could pick was Harpie Lady 1, as it increased the attack of all of your wind monsters by 300 points. But another great choice was Cyber Harpie Lady, due to it being the highest attack Harpie Lady that you could play, which could potentially be incredibly useful to take down an opponent's high attack monster. This made the card a genuine upgrade over the original Harpie Lady in the TCG and anime. But of course, even though this card is definitely the stronger of the two, both Mai and some duels in real life often still play the original card out of sentimentality. And reflecting into number 3 is Elegant Egotist, a card that could turn one Harpie Lady into 3. In the TCG though, this was only technically true though, because if you controlled Harpie Lady, you could either summon another copy of Harpie Lady, or Harpie Lady Sisters, a monster that's a combination of all 3 original Harpie Ladies with their attacks added together and then cut in half. But in the anime, Egotist would actually summon the other 2 Harpie Ladies to complete the trio. And this combo was something that Mai used to great effect across most of her duels, with Egotist allowing her to swarm the field with her powerful Harpie Lady Sisters. These were decently strong beat sticks, but also paired excellently with Cyber Shield, as these sisters would gain the same buffs as the original Harpie Lady. Mai was a smart duelist though, and didn't just use these Harpie Ladies purely as beat sticks. It also took advantage of the swarm capabilities in order to boost the power of her other cards like Harpie's Pet Dragon. And this card's most iconic use was definitely in Mai's duel against Yami Merrick, where she used Harpie Lady alongside Elegant Egotist in order to bring out the 3 tributes necessary to summon out Merrick's Winged Dragon of Ra. And it's this strength as a swarming tool that made Elegant Egotist a really strong part of the Harpie Lady strategy. Now, unfortunately, the TCG version of the card is still weaker than its anime counterpart, since you only get the chance to summon one monster. And while you can still technically summon out Harpie Lady Sisters, the TCG version of Sisters is really lackluster, because even though it's stronger than the original Harpie Lady, it's usually not worth playing because it can only ever be summoned out by Egotist. But Egotist has still seen a lot of success in competitive Harpie Lady decks, because of how easily it lets you bring out a free Harpie Lady directly from your deck, so long as you just control Harpie Lady on the field. Which is really easy as an activation requirement, because most Harpie monsters are usually treated as Harpie Lady while in the field or in the graveyard, which makes Egotist a great way of summoning out a free monster from your deck to bridge off into an easy rank 4. And what's even better is that Egotist is even searchable from the deck or graveyard with the effect of Hysteric Sign, an excellent continuous spell for the strategy that allows you to search one of your best swarming tools, and it can even let you add 3 Harpie Lady cards from your deck to your hand during the end phase if it happens to be sent to the graveyard. And overall, it's really neat to see the way Mai used Egotist in the anime is actually the best way to use the card in the TCG, as a swarming tool that can allow you to bridge off into other plays. Like how in Duel Links it was used to go into their Synchro Boss monster, that was enough to make them a top tier meta threat. And while you're not likely to use it to summon an Egyptian god, it's currently a great way to get free materials on the board for Xyz, Link, and even Synchro plays, especially when paired with their support around it. And sweeping into number 2 is Harpie's Feather Duster, one of Mai's most prominent and iconic staples and one of the strongest cards in her deck, because Feather Duster allows her to destroy all spell and trap cards her opponent controls with a single card. This led to Feather Duster being used by Mai throughout the series, and is a card that often gave her a huge advantage by either dealing with an opponent's tricky back row setup, or by clearing away their dangerous set cards before your opponent had a chance to activate them. This made Harpie's Feather Duster an absolute boon to her strategy, as it meant that Mai's Harpie Ladies were always safe from battle traps or even your opponent's equip cards, and was actually the main reason Mai was able to defeat Joey Wheeler in her last duel of the series, where Feather Duster not only cleared away both of Joey's battle traps, it even managed to destroy Red Eye's Black Dragon's sword, giving her Harpie Ladies a path to attack. But arguably, the most interesting use of Feather Duster in the series was back in the Duelist Kingdom arc during Mai's duel against Taya Gardner. This duel was set up after Yugi was defeated by Kaiba, where not only had Yugi lost his star chips, he was also going through an internal crisis. Thankfully, Mai had come along and offered Yugi some of her spare star chips to repay her debt, but because Yugi was still struggling with his inner demons, he couldn't answer her. This annoyed Mai, so she tried to coax him into taking the star chips by challenging him to a duel, but to no success. Taya then took Yugi's place in the name of friendship, and while she was an okay duelist, there was no chance of her being able to stand up to Mai Valentine, who could have easily defeated Taya's shining friendship by activating Feather Duster to destroy her silver bow and arrow. And while she considered it, ultimately Mai allowed Taya to defeat her, surrendering the duel to give Yugi back his star chips, and also trying to inspire him to go all out in their eventual duels in the finals, all the while giving Taya's friendship a chance to actually shine. Because even though Mai could have won, in her own words, there are some cards out there that just aren't worth it to be played. But in the TCG, Feather Duster is always worth it. Having the chance to clear away your opponent's back row has always been a strong effect even to this day, with the likes of MST, Heavy Storm, and Twin Twisters all being great staples that could be found in competitive decks across the game's history, as these cards allow you to deal with your opponent's oppressive floodgates or destroy their set cards before they get a chance to activate them. But out of all the ways to clean up your opponent's spell and trap cards, Feather Duster is one of the strongest in the game's history, as it has the chance to clear away up to 6 of your opponent's cards for the price of 1, with no activation condition, cost, or risk. You don't even have to worry about destroying your own back row. In fact, the card was so good that it was banned in the TCG for over 16 years. Up until 2020, where it was limited and became a near instant inclusion in the side and main decks of a ton of different strategies as a way to destroy trap decks for virtually no cost, as activating Harpie's Feather Duster leaves these decks with nearly no way to strike back, which is actually really cool that the way Mai used Harpies in the anime is exactly the same as why it's so good in the TCG. Destroying your opponent's spell and trap cards can lead you to a huge advantage no matter which world you're in, and Mai teaches us a useful lesson with the card. If you want to remain friends with people who are on back row decks, you better probably not activate this card. And flying into number 1 is the card that, for a while, was Mai's only friend, Harpie Lady. Now, there are actually a few different versions of Harpie Lady that span across the eras. There's the likes of Harpie Conductor, Harpie Channeler, and Harpie Perfumer, who are always treated as Harpie Lady while in the field or in the graveyard. There's the Cyber Harpie Lady 1, 2, and 3, who are always treated as Harpie Lady no matter where they are. And of course, there's the original Harpie Lady, who unlike the other Harpie Ladies, is actually just a level 4 vanilla with 1300 attack and 1400 defense, with a flavor text that describes it as beautiful but deadly in battle. And that makes perfect sense for Mai's ace monster, as while other duelists would sometimes underestimate Mai, she proved time and time again how much of a deadly force she was, with a lot of that power being concentrated behind the versatility of her Harpie Lady strategy. And like many of the other ace cards in the series, Harpie Lady also had a special connection to its wielder, because Mai had grown up alone without a real friendship, which led to her seeing her Harpie Ladies as her only friends up until she met Joey, Yugi, and the rest of the gang. But overall, the card was just amazingly versatile in her hands, and was used by her throughout this series as her main ace monster that could adapt to a ton of different situations as a beat stick, a swarming tool, and even as the center of a control strategy. And this versatility was given the chance to shine in the TCG, because in 2014, Harpie Ladies managed to showcase how useful they could be in the right hands by actually winning a YCS. And a huge part of that is thanks to its modern support centered on the Harpie Lady strategy around swarming the field with as many Harpie Lady variants as possible, giving you easier access to the extra deck, all the while giving you more opportunities to trigger Harpie's Hunting Ground, which you could use to either clear your opponent's back row, or pop your own sign in order to gain some kind of advantage. And this same use carried over into Duel Links, where Harpie saw some time as a dominant strategy for similar reasons as to why it was strong in the TCG, and was even slightly better there thanks to its access to the previously mentioned Cyber/Harpie Lady. And funnily enough, Harpies were actually very meta for a long time, where they would constantly hit cards using Harpie decks on the ban list to try to rein in their power. But they just kept being the best deck. They even once tried to nerf the Harpie Lady field spell skill in a hilarious turn of events that actually made the skill stronger by mistake, where they had to nerf it again to actually make it worse. Now, in the modern TCG though, the Harpie Lady strategy has fallen off somewhat and rarely ever gets a chance to shine competitively anymore. But echoes of this strategy can still be found in a ton of different modern decks. Harpie's Feather Duster is a great staple you can find in just about every deck. Harpie's Feather Storm is a powerful floodgate that can sometimes win games all on its own and was used in flu strategies. And even Harpie Conductor once saw play in Tri-Brigade strategies for being a wing beast monster that could be used to bridge into some Morg. So it's nice to see that the same versatility the cards had when Mai was using them carries over into the TCG, and even though the Harpie cards are oftentimes used differently, it's a testament to how adaptable the Harpie strategy is, and how smart Mai was as a duelist to get the most out of her favorite card. Alright, and that's the list. If you'd like more videos like this one, let us know down in the comments below what you'd like to see next. And remember to like the video and subscribe if you want to keep up to date on any future lists. And thanks for watching.